It's always a privilege and honor to speak in front of this August gathering on telemedicine. And many of you must be wondering, Intel, a chip company, what has it got to do with telemedicine? Before I get into this presentation, I just wanted to give you a small story which I read recently. A doctor who was driving an SUV had frequent problems with his car. So he took it to the nearest workshop, to the mechanic. The mechanic looked at the car for 2 hours and said, okay, I fixed the problem. You've got to pay me 20,000 rupees. The doctor was shocked. He said, hey, it's just 2 hours of work. You charge me 20,000 rupees. I don't charge so much for a patient who stays in my hospital for 2 days, and I do like 5 to 6 tests. You've just done 1 test. The mechanic remarked to the doctor, Mr. Doctor, your models have not changed since the days of Adam and Eve. Our models keep changing for every 12, 18 months. Okay. So that's a short introduction to how people look at different industries or different perspectives. Now, I just want to give you some context before I get into healthcare. By 2015, the world would have added another billion people onto the internet. Today we are about 2.5 billion. We'll be 3 billion plus in the next 3 years, 4 years. There will be 15 billion devices connected on the internet. Okay? That's roughly 2 devices for every person on the planet. And the data traffic would grow 5 times to almost 1,000 exabytes. So exa is 1 followed by almost 18 zeros. Okay? That's the level of internet traffic. What is 200 exabytes today will become 5 times in the next 4 years. And rightfully so, because the internet is clearly rich media. People are uploading photos, pictures, videos, and increasingly healthcare. If you're going to send MRI scans and CTIs and so on over the internet, that's rich media. So that's going to contribute as well. Now this is the framework or the context in which we are operating, where every device that connects to electricity will compute. Every device that computes will connect to the internet. So think of internet as the electricity of the 21st century. Now how do we leverage that for the industry that we are all in, primarily healthcare? And what is Intel trying to do in this space? So when I talked about the fact that there will be 15 billion devices, it started off with the traditional desktops, laptops, most of us are familiar with, and increasingly you will see more smartphones and tablets, healthcare devices connecting onto the internet, embedded devices and so on, rugged PCs, where you see a whole bunch of devices showcased for this exhibition that has an access to internet where people can look at parameters in a remote manner. So this is going to be the context or the environment we are all going to operate. Now, it's extremely important that all these devices talk. We can have compatibility of software and hardware across these devices, and people can access information irrespective of the form factor and the device what they have. Just to put things in context, today, if you look at the cell phone industry, let's say you play games. It is not easy to play the same game at the same version across different models of cell phone, even though if the cell phone is from the same vendor. There's no compatibility there. You got to go to the website and download another game that works for the particular handset what you bought. So application people who are writing games, for example, for cell phones, they write hundreds of versions because there are hundreds of devices based on a particular architecture. So that type of incompatibility cannot let an industry flourish specifically in healthcare where the costs are as it is high. We have a high starting base as we speak where technology is still at an infancy in the healthcare segment. Now, how do you ensure that there is a consistent user experience? Now, Intel is trying to enable this across devices with a standard sort of architecture where we'll be able to run multiple operating systems. We'll have applications that runs across these devices. We are trying to drive what we call as a compute continuum, which means if I'm doing video conferencing, a doctor is doing video conferencing, if he's on the road, he can do the video conferencing with specialists or patients or somebody else on the other side on his cell phone. Once he gets to his office or his hospital, he has a bigger screen, which could be a laptop or a bigger PC. He can do the video conferencing application without switching it off. He can seamlessly move from one device to another device. Now, that's the type of continuum we are trying to drive at Intel. Now, interestingly, we call it the compute continuum. The alliance which is driving standards is the continua, right? Now, think of, from a healthcare perspective, what we as industry need to achieve is a healthcare continuum. Across devices, across software, across data and services that reside on the cloud, you've got to make sure that we have a healthcare continua. That's the only way we are going to grow. Okay? Now, it's interesting to see, to drive this, we try to bring in compelling platforms and technologies as the platform. And we continue to drive Moore's law, where we drive faster and better chips, which can pack more and more capabilities. We work with the industry in terms of making sure that there is multiple operating system support. You can choose the operating system what you want. I think Clint talked about Android, Microsoft Windows, Linux, what have you. You need to have a lot of software companies, ISVs, developers who are creating applications. And finally, we need to figure distribution channels or companies who can go and deploy these solutions. Now, the rationale to do this is very simple. The PC industry has shown that democratization of technology is good for the world. Right? 30 years back, when it was just mainframes, it was confined to a few large organizations. Then the era of minis, then the era of PCs. Very simple. Whenever you drive standards, they drive innovation. Innovation drives volumes. Volumes lower the cost. It feeds back into standards. Standards drive innovation. It's a spiral that keeps on building. That's the spiral we have to achieve, or what we are trying to do with Continua, with partners as part of Continua and the healthcare industry. We got to create the virtual spiral that keeps feeding on. Now, ultimately, that's going to drive down cost of healthcare. That's going to drive down cost at the patient level, at the hospitals level, and ultimately, it's going to provide better healthcare for all of us. Not just mature markets, but the emerging markets as well. Right? Now, for a country like India, where you see a lot of migration happening from villages to cities, people who finish 8th, 10th standard, they want to come and get into shops, they want to get into car drivers, they want to do into some retail salesperson. How do you force doctors from cities to say that, hey, you've got to go into rural areas and rural villages and do your job for 2 years, 3 years? Now, we got to leverage technology. Whether it's education or healthcare, you've got to leverage technology to make sure that we are able to permeate it to the masses. Without that, is it pragmatic to think that India can build another 10,000 colleges and 500 universities? That's going to take another 30 years. So how do you do remote learning? How do you do long distance learning? How do you create a digital infrastructure? Same thing with healthcare. Dr. Reddy talked about a bunch of things about making sure there are e-ICUs and so on. So with few specialists, few doctors, you have a capacity problem. How do you leverage technology that you will be able to still offer affordable services to the masses? Now, that's what we are trying to do. Now, is this possible just with Intel? Absolutely not. We need to have collaboration across the industry. And history has shown that whenever we have driven these standards, it's good for the industry. Now, Intel always believes in standards. Intel is a horizontal ecosystem. We are not vertically integrated. We do what we do best, chips, platforms, and technologies. We work with the operating system companies. We work with applications, make sure they are enabled so that the benefits are there for the consumers and businesses. I'll give you a couple of examples of what Intel did over the last 30 years, which is very common. Right? So back in the early mid-90s, there were about 16 wires coming out of a PC to connect to your monitor, to speakers, and so on and so forth. And Intel's legendary chairman, Andy Grove, said, hey, this is not how a consumer should look at this. Can we drive a new standard? Intel created the USB standard. Today, USB is de facto across consumer gadgets, devices, whether you talk about MP3 players, phones, iPods, iPads, what have you. That's the media of transfer of data between one device and another device. Now, that's kind of revolutionized the industry. Another standard was Ethernet, which Intel started way back with Digital and Xerox. Now, networking, which is kind of the baby towards an internet, started because Intel worked with the industry to create a standard. Today, laptops, we take wireless for granted. We are surfing emails and the web from wherever we are as long as we are on a hotspot. Because Intel came and brought in Centrino technology early part of this century. So the point we are trying to highlight is that if we are able to drive standards, that's going to become that much more easy for the industry. Okay? And we got to work on all three aspects of any product or service. If you abstract any product or service today, across the world is whatever seen in the last 200 years, they either talk about individual productivity or collaboration or experience. If you're able to do all three together, you create a game-changing industry. You create a new business model. That's what we have to do as an industry. And we have consistently looked at what is needed for industries across the board, whether it's education, healthcare, small, medium business, and so on. And fundamentally, what we'll continue to drive is we'll continue to bring in leadership platforms with energy efficient performance. Because if you're looking at handheld devices or gadgets for somebody to look at healthcare data, then you need to make sure that you're not only compromising, you have the longest battery life without compromising performance. So that is something, energy efficient performance across our platforms would be one of the key vectors until we continue to drive this marketplace. The second one is security. For those of you who know, McAfee is one of the world leaders in security, it's an Intel company now. We will embed security technologies into the device going forward so that we're going to put the malware guys out of business. Once you embed security at the chip level, it's very difficult to go and hack a network or hack a device. In the field of healthcare, it's that much more critical. So you want to make sure that a patient's record is securely delivered to the specialist device, whatever be the device, so that he looks at the parameters without compromising security. Now, increasingly, people are looking at cloud. How do you make sure that the data, what you have on cloud, is safe and secure? Right? So security is going to be another pillar where Intel is going to drive very, very hard at the chip level. And the third one is going to be on connectivity. Right? We got to make sure that all these devices are agnostic to technology. You want Wi-Fi, you want 3G, you want WiMAX, you want 4G, you want LTE. We got to make sure all these devices are agnostic to technology. So energy efficient performance, security, and wireless would be the three pillars. We will drive the platforms. We'll work with industry to make sure that, hey, this is able to leverage, the industry is able to leverage technology to make sure that we address the capacity problems. We really take healthcare to the masses. And I just want to end my presentation with a famous quote of Bob Noyce. Bob Noyce was the co-founder of the integrated circuit way back in the late 50s, along with Jack Kilby of Texas Instruments. He also is the co-founder of Intel Corporation. His famous words were, don't be encumbered by history, let's go and do something wonderful. I think Continuous Alliance, in the spirit of what we're trying to do, is exactly living up to this principle. I think we have lots of rooms to grow. I think there's tremendous opportunities, not in a business sense, but in the sense of what we can really do something to change the course of healthcare in this world. That's all I had. Thank you.